Here we go, our first in-class trip to a death camp. After learning so much about the Warsaw Ghetto, it's only fitting that we visit the place where 300,000 of its inhabitants met their fate. Treblinka. Before we get started, let me explain a little bit about the area. Treblinka was actually two camps, located a mile apart from each other. Treblinka 1 was a forced labor camp, where 10,000 prisoners were worked to death. Treblinka 2 was the famous death camp, where more than 800,000 people died. With the exception of Auschwitz, more people were killed at Treblinka than in any other camp. We're right here at the parking level, and this is a map of the entire camp. We're first going to walk to Treblinka 2. This was the extermination camp. We're going to continue down this road to Treblinka 1, the labor camp, and we're going to end our journey at the execution site.
We're walking this?
We're walking this. Alright, so this is our little walk today.
Just drop your camera.
Let's go. The first thing we come to are several stone slabs, telling us exactly what happened here.
Wait, I want to take a panorama. It's all the same thing written in different languages. Well, I'm so
Would you like to take a picture of me?
sorry. I thought. Trying to take a panorama.
This language?
Oh, there's different languages?
Yeah,
This is
that's
English
like
right here, guys.
Eurobestan.
No one knows what that is. This one's English. That one's Hebrew.
Then we reach the area of the main gate. The wording on the stone says, extermination camp. Upon entering the camp, we came across stone bars in the ground, symbolizing the railroad tracks that brought people to their deaths, and large upright stones that represent the boundaries of the extermination camp. The trains would come to this point, and this was the unloading platform for all the people. The people would be taken off the trains, and then the people would walk down that path over there, straight to where the gas chambers are. There's a map right here explaining the Treblinka 2 extermination camp. We're basically right here now, and it's a good example of what this whole camp was about. And some of the stuff may surprise you about this camp. If you even look at the key here, number 4 has a zoo. The SS actually kept a small zoo for themselves for entertainment purposes while they're working at this extermination camp. So our next stop is to see the spot where the extermination camp and the gas chambers existed. Let's go. Treblinka 2 is divided into 3 main sections. The first, an administrative area, accommodated the SS. Believe it or not, only 25 SS officers worked here. They were aided by 100 so-called Tronikis, Polish or Ukrainian guards who were willing to help in the killing process, and 800 prisoners who did all the dirty work. The next section was called the lower camp. This area consisted of a railroad station where the victims were unloaded. It also consisted of 2 undressing huts, one for the men, the other for women and children. An infirmary was also located here, where the old and the sick would be brought immediately after arrival. After being brought in, they would be shot and thrown into a pit. The final section was called the upper camp, where the gas chambers were located. Men went in first, while women had their hair shaved to make socks for submarine crews. And behind the gas chambers were the cremation pits. So here we go, to stand on the very spot where the killings took place. I don't think there's any amount of preparation we could do in the classroom to completely prepare us for what we are about to see. Surrounding the site are stones with the names of cities, towns, and villages associated with Treblinka. Some of the stones are even dedicated to individuals, including someone we closely studied in class.
This was the site of the gas chambers at Treblinka. This was the field where almost 900,000 people were murdered in World War II. This is the monument dedicated in their memory. And first, right here, we have the meaning here, never again. There's stones all around here commemorating people who died. And if you follow me, this is the stone dedicated to Janusz Korczak. Janusz Korczak was the Mr. Rogers of Poland. He ran the orphanage in the Warsaw ghetto. He had the opportunity to leave the ghetto and escape, but he refused to leave his children. And so he boarded the train to Treblinka, and he died with his children in the gas chambers. This was where the crematoria was at Treblinka. This is where they burned hundreds of thousands of bodies. Right next to the structure are these right here coming out of the ground. These represented the pipes where the gas would be released from after everyone had been killed. There's many of these surrounding the crematoria site. It shows you how many people that they had to dispose of, as the Nazis said, every day. One thing, if you notice about this camp, it's really out in the woods, the middle of farmland. They tried to keep this place very secret, so no one would know.
So now we leave the extermination camp to visit the labor camp. We thought it would be an uneventful walk through the woods, but then we came upon a sight that none of us could have imagined.
This is the gravel pit at Treblinka. As you can see, this entire pit here was dug out by the prisoners at Treblinka. They dug the ground out to get the rocks to build all the structures in both Treblinka 2, the extermination camp, and Treblinka 1, the labor camp. It's just incredible to even think about how many people died building this ditch, getting the rocks out. And there's the remains of one of the structures right here. It's absolutely incredible. We're at another spot at the gravel pit now. This paragraph explains exactly what went on. The prisoners from the forced labor camp worked. A few hundred victims who stayed there at the time had to do very hard manual work. They were namely responsible for loading gravel onto the narrow gauge tipping wagons, which were pulled by a small steam locomotive. At the ramp, the gravel was transshipped from the tipping wagons onto the wide ones. The quarry was an enterprise where the prisoners were forced to work over 12 hours a day. Many of them died from exhaustion or as a result of the guards' terror. And as you can see here, here's another view of that quarry. Completely dug out by the prisoners at Treblinka. And it's just incredible how much was dug out. This is just absolutely incredible. Our next stop on our tour of Treblinka is Treblinka 1, the forced labor camp. There were many workshops in this place, facilities for the prisoners, and it's right down this path. So let's go see and take a look what we could find. I'm now at Treblinka 1, the labor camp. In front of me is one of the old structures. This was actually the latrine, the bathroom, as you can see inside there. And as we pan around here, you're going to see the signs representing where all the buildings of this labor camp once stood, and the foundations. we've got the tailor's workshop, the barracks for the Jewish men, the barracks for the Jewish women, and it extends throughout this entire field. Used to be structures here at Treblinka 1. Just to give you guys a better look at Treblinka 1 and all the structures that used to be here, I'm standing on the barracks for Jewish men. And as I pan around, you can see the signs and the foundations of the buildings that once existed in this labor camp. And how far it extends. Right in front of me is the tailor's workshop and the machinery workshop. Now, according to most historical reports, the Nazis completely leveled everything at Treblinka. We found out that's not true. If you look behind me, this is where the kitchen used to be at Treblinka 1, the forced labor camp. You can even see the steps going down here. And as we go over here, this used to be the cellar where they would store the food. And as you can see, the part of the building is intact today.
Now, you weren't supposed to go down into the structure, but I had as much temptation to do it as some of you have with your cell phones in class. Plus, I wanted to show you guys as much as I can.
I am now going down the stairs in the cellar at Treblinka labor camp. Just to give you, everyone in the classroom, a good view of exactly what these structures looked like. Our last stop at Treblinka is the execution site, right down this road from Treblinka 1. This is the execution site at Treblinka. This is our last stop on the tour of the camp. This was the wall where they murdered all the people. The writing here is in Polish. It simply says that this is the spot where everyone was killed. And around it are all crosses marking known victims that were murdered here by the Nazis. As you can see, their names are right here.
Well, we certainly had a great deal to think about after our tour was completed. On our way back to the bus, we had time to let everything sink in. I think the most ironic factor about our visit was the tranquility of the forest surrounding the camp. How can such a peaceful place have ever been the center of death for so many people?
Being here in Treblinka was very moving. Being able to walk all the whole thing and watching the train tracks and all the stones and all the memorials, it's very touching, and you wouldn't really get the same feeling by just looking at it and
yeah, it was cool
looking at
seeing
photos.
it in person.
Seeing it in person was a whole new deal, and
It made a big difference, like
made a
actually
huge difference.
learning about it and then stepping foot on the actual site.
And as we're walking through the whole thing, so many thoughts like race in your head about how many people have been killed here and have been
And it could
walked
be
the
one of
same
your relatives
distance.
that you never knew, or there could be a family name that just ended here.
It's
It doesn't
scary.
exist anymore. It's frightening, but it's definitely a really cool experience.
And I hope it was educational for you in the classroom as well. As we leave Treblinka, keep in mind, each camp is very different, and we'll be going to more as time goes on, to get an even better understanding of what it is like to see a concentration camp.